Alright, so this is going to be my video on standard deviation, just an introduction of what it is and how we're going to use it. So standard deviation is kind of like is a statistical measure of how far apart things are. So if I had a whole bunch of numbers that were really close, 4, 5, 7, versus a bunch of numbers that were much further apart, then this group is further apart. And what does that mean? That just means that it has a larger standard deviation. Standard deviation. So you'll see that written as this little O thingy notation. And this is closer together. So this means it has a lower standard deviation, this guy. That's pretty much it. That's what a standard deviation is. It's a little trickier to calculate than an average, but it's like the average of how far apart things are in general. So the definition is average of how far apart things are. Maybe not a true average, but I think that's fine for what we're talking about. The variance is another term, is another spread, another measure of how far apart. And that's just when you take your standard deviation and you take it to the power of 2, or this to the power of 2. This is your variance. So overall, why do you need to know that? Because in general, we can calculate the variance, and then we take the square root of it to get rid of that power of 2 to turn it into our standard deviation. So when you take a variance and you take a square root of it, then it becomes standard deviation, which is what we want. The last thing that I'm going to briefly talk about is the empirical rule. So in a normal distribution, which is like what generally average populations are assumed to have these characteristics, when you have a normal curve, it will look something like this, a little bit better than that. You can look up online. And here in the middle, we have the mean, the average, and then one standard deviation away, so from -1 to 1, this houses 68% of everyone. If you are between 2 standard deviations away, now it's 95% from here to here. And then if you go 3 standard deviations away, well, now you're so far out there that it is 99.7% away. Of the population is within that grouping. So if you're more than 2 standard deviations above or below the population in anything, you're pretty rare. And then when you're 3, you're extremely rare. So that would mean like 3 people out of 1,000 are better or worse than this. So we are going 1 away, 68%, 2 away, 95%, and then 3 away. I think that's the easiest way to say it for now, 99.7%. And this is kind of just a brief thing I'm bringing up that you'll see again in future math, but I just want you to hear it now, and then ideally when you hear it again in the future, it might make a little more sense. So this is my basic intro, and then I'm going to do a video on how to find standard deviation and calculate it and use it.